Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science channel, where we wander into the strange and the speculative with just enough sarcasm to keep you awake for the first 3 minutes, and then, hopefully, gently tip you over the edge into sleep. Picture this: the Earth, blue and glowing, hanging in space like a jewel that's been left behind on a black velvet cushion. You can almost feel yourself floating toward it, yet part of you wonders, was this ever really your home? Or were you, and everyone like you, simply placed here, like a decorative houseplant dropped into the corner of a cosmic living room? You probably won't survive this question, not in the sense of your body suddenly combusting, but in the sense that once you let it slip into your imagination, it sticks. It itches. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And because I love to know who's drifting along with me, post your location and your local time down in the comments. There's something cozy about knowing someone in Tokyo is listening at sunrise, while someone in Toronto is already half asleep in the dark. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You touch down, feet meeting soil, grass brushing your ankles. The air smells just right. Nitrogen, oxygen, a dash of ozone like it was tailored for your lungs. But here's the first unsettling thought. What are the odds? The universe is large and mean, filled mostly with radiation and emptiness. Yet you arrive on this particular ball of dirt, already fitted out with breathable air, drinkable water, and fruit that looks suspiciously like it was color-coded to appeal to your eyes. It feels less like chance and more like set design. If you've ever stepped into a stage play and noticed the wallpaper was too perfect, that's the vibe. History tells you that humans adapted to this planet over millions of years. Apes climbing down from trees, knuckles scraping, brains swelling, and eventually someone deciding fire was more fun than raw gazelle. Mainstream archaeology nods politely at this timeline, pointing to bones and stone tools, while shrugging at the missing details. Still, a few scientists whisper the panspermia idea, that life may have been seeded here by comets or even alien caretakers. Not proof, but a wink in the direction of something more deliberate. And if you zoom out, Earth really is a lucky jackpot. A stable star, a magnetic shield, liquid water, and just the right tilt to give you seasons instead of endless scorching summers. Historians still argue whether early civilizations saw this as pure divine gift or suspected some trickery. That life here was too neatly balanced. One cheeky Babylonian text even describes Earth as a garden made for laborers, which sounds suspiciously like you've been assigned to cosmic landscaping duty. Meanwhile, you can't help noticing that your own body is a bit mismatched to the environment. Sure, you can walk upright and type on smartphones, but your skin burns under the sun faster than a marshmallow over a campfire, and your back aches from a spine that seems poorly engineered for long-term standing. It makes you wonder, did someone plop you here half-prepared, like a rushed software update? The fringe tidbit that floats around in late-night forums is that humans are too fragile for a planet we supposedly evolved on, our eyes too sensitive to brightness, our sleep cycles too easily wrecked by a full moon. Walking further, you imagine the earliest humans blinking at the landscape like confused tourists. Was this paradise, or an elaborate terrarium? Picture a cosmic landlord sweeping through the galaxy, pausing at Earth and saying, "Yep, this'll do, drop M here," and then never leaving a manual. Classic move. Jokes aside, it's easy to feel the mystery settle into your shoulders. You look around at the forests, oceans, and mountains, all perfectly suited to keep you alive, yet perfectly capable of ending you if you're careless. This isn't a hotel, it's more like a survival test. And here's the kicker: the fossil record doesn't always flow smoothly. There are leaps, big, brain-sized leaps, that look suspiciously like someone poked the simulation forward. like when you're trying to beat a video game level and finally just Google the cheat codes. You stretch out on a rock, watching the night sky unfold. Stars flicker like pixelated breadcrumbs, scattered so neatly you can't help but feel they're spelling something you're not yet able to read. The Greeks certainly thought so, drawing gods and monsters into the constellations. And if you listen closely, the stars almost hum, like background music in a movie you didn't know you were starring in. Then again, maybe this is simply human pattern making, the same instinct that sees faces in clouds and holy messages in burnt toast. Maybe you're just good at telling yourself stories, but still, the nagging thought remains. What if you didn't sprout here at all? What if you were delivered? The ancient Egyptians hinted at it, describing humanity as children of the stars. The Dogon people of Mali preserved strange stories about Sirius, knowing details about its companion star long before modern telescopes. And while historians still argue whether these tales were coincidence, outside influence, or pure myth, you can't help feeling like whispers have always been there, guiding you toward suspicion. You let your eyelids droop, half lulled by the cricket chirps and half distracted by a buzzing thought. Maybe your whole existence is part of a careful placement, a cosmic experiment. If so, who or what placed you here? Aliens, time travelers, gods, or just the universe itself rolling dice with a sly grin? You chuckle quietly, realizing that whether or not you were planted here, you've definitely been stuck here, with bills, dentist appointments, and whatever your neighbor's dog is doing at 3 a.m. some cosmic joke. Still, there's comfort in the idea that your placement wasn't random, that maybe, just maybe, you were meant to be here, even if you were dropped in without the courtesy of a welcome basket. And as you shift on the ground, you sense the story isn't ending. It's just beginning to unfold, one strange possibility at a time. You're lying there on the grass, still squinting at those stars, when the thought grows louder in your head. What if you're not just here, but being watched here? Not in a paranoid government drone in the backyard way, but in a broader, cosmic sense. Imagine Earth as part of some vast alien zoo exhibit, tucked away in the quiet suburbs of the Milky Way. Yes, you are the curious little mammal packing in its enclosure, while unseen visitors stroll past the glass, sipping their galactic lattes, whispering, "Look, honey, the humans are inventing cryptocurrency." Isn't that adorable? The zoo hypothesis is an actual term in astrobiology. It's the idea that extraterrestrials might know about us but deliberately avoid contact, the way a conscientious zookeeper tries not to tap on the glass of a nervous aquarium fish. The thought is strangely comforting and unsettling at once. Comforting because, hey, you're interesting enough to be in the exhibit. Unsettling because it means someone out there is monitoring you like an animal documentary narrator. Here we see the suburban human in its natural habitat, making microwave noodles at 2 a.m. Historically, the notion of cosmic observation isn't new. Ancient cultures often described gods who descended from the skies to guide, test, or punish. The Greeks had Zeus chucking thunderbolts, the Mesopotamians had Anu sitting above, and the Norse imagined Odin peeking in through ravens. Historians still argue whether these tales were purely symbolic or encoded memories of actual encounters with something, or someone, beyond Earth. A quirky tidbit that makes this thought itchier. In 1960, astronomer Frank Drake, not the rapper, the telescope guy, proposed SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. He even drafted the famous Drake equation, estimating how many alien civilizations might be out there. But one fringe interpretation of his work: maybe we don't need to search. Maybe they're already here, staying quiet on purpose because they've tagged Earth as a do not disturb zone. You can almost hear the sarcastic alien chatter as they check in on you. Subject H7, still inventing reality TV, Progress questionable. You laugh softly, though a shiver slips down your spine. It's like the feeling of walking into a dark room and sensing eyes on you, even if nothing moves. Humans are experts at imagining watchers, yet the possibility that it isn't imagination at all, that's the twist. As you wander along a path, picture a transparent dome overhead. Outside, galaxies spiral and flicker, but you're sealed in. The creatures beyond it can see you, but you can't see them. Kind of like ants in an ant farm. Sure, you scuttle around, build cities, wage wars, and celebrate birthdays, but maybe none of it is as private as you think. Maybe every whispered thought, every invention, every terrible haircut is recorded, filed away for future alien documentaries. The rise and fall of the human hair mullet, a galactic tragedy. You pause to imagine how a civilization might set up such a system. Would they have satellites cloaked in orbit? Biological drones that look like birds, watching through black eyes, or something stranger like encoded observers in your very dreams. That last one makes you shift uncomfortably, though you secretly like the poetry of it. The zoo metaphor also explains something curious, the eerie silence of the universe. If you've ever heard of the Fermi paradox, you know the problem. Billions of stars, billions of planets. Statistically, someone else should be out there shouting across the void. And yet, nothing. Not a whisper. Historians still argue whether this silence means we're alone or simply quarantined, like the loud party in the apartment that management prefers not to acknowledge. And just when you're ready to write this off as pure speculation, a modern fact edges in: UFO sightings. From cave art depicting strange discs to radar blips tracked by Navy pilots, the record is peppered with moments that look suspiciously like a watchful eye peeking in. A few credible witnesses even describe crafts that simply hovered, observed, and then zipped away without interaction, like bored zookeepers making their rounds. You grin, realizing the comedy in it. If humans really are in a cosmic zoo, we must be the monkeys throwing bananas at the glass while the tourists politely pretend not to laugh. Maybe that explains why Earth hasn't been invited to join the Galactic Federation yet. Your Yelp reviews are atrocious. Still, you lean into the thought. Being in a zoo isn't always cruel. It can mean protection. No meteor swarms have obliterated you recently. No unfriendly alien armies have landed on the White House lawn. Maybe the enclosure keeps you safe, tucked away until you're ready to step out. The idea soothes you, even as it unsettles, like being wrapped in a blanket by someone you can't see. You close your eyes briefly, picturing alien families strolling past your enclosure, their kids pointing at you. Look, Dad, the humans are learning to split the atom. Should we be worried? The dad shrugs. Give them another millennium. Whether you believe it or not, the possibility hangs in the air, heavy and quiet, like the gaze of unseen eyes in the night sky. If you were placed here, maybe the placement wasn't random at all. Maybe it was deliberate, curated, and monitored, part of a grand design you're only just beginning to sense. And so you keep walking, under stars that feel a little too bright tonight, wondering not just about your origins but about your audience. Your footsteps crunch over dry soil and you feel the weight of history beneath you, not just the grand, sweeping kind with kings and empires, but the quiet history written into bones buried deep below. You can almost hear the whispers of paleontologists dusting off fossils, fitting skull fragments together like jigsaw puzzles. And here, where the story sharpens, that infamous gap, the so-called missing link. You peer back into the fossil record and see it flickering, almost like someone skipped a few pages in humanity's origin story. The textbook narrative tells you that humans evolved from ape-like ancestors over millions of years, with each step in the chain carefully documented by bones, tools, and cave art. Yet if you look closely, there are sudden jumps, moments when the brain size leaps forward, or when stone tools suddenly grow more complex, almost as if somebody leaned over your shoulder and said, "No, no, try it this way." You scratch your head, feeling the timeline slip through your fingers. Mainstream fact check. Homo habilis was making crude stone tools about 2.5 million years ago, and by the time Homo erectus came along, the toolkit had advanced dramatically. Fire, cooking, organized hunting, things seemed to accelerate. Historians still argue whether this acceleration was purely environmental adaptation or whether it hints at something external. And that's the part that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling. A quirky tidbit you may not have heard. In the 19th century, some scientists were so rattled by the gaps in the fossil record that they speculated entire civilizations or species had been lost to history, whole chapters erased by cataclysm or design. One fringe thinker even suggested that humanity had been reseeded more than once, rebooted like a stubborn computer. It sounds wild, but the fossil record does have a knack for acting like a redacted document. Big black bars where you wish there was text. You imagine ancient humans standing up straighter, brains swelling, suddenly realizing they could make fire or paint stories on cave walls. Was that evolution doing its slow, grinding work? Or was someone tinkering, dropping a spark into the dark and watching the flames rise? You picture a hand not entirely human guiding the brush, teaching the rhythm of survival, and then disappearing again, leaving only the question, why? The debate lingers in academic halls. Some argue that the sudden rise of symbolic thought, the leap from banging rocks to drawing constellations, was too abrupt, like humanity got a software patch it didn't quite deserve yet. Historians still argue whether this leap was sparked by diet, hello, cooked meat, climate change, or shall we say, outside influence. You smile at the absurdity but also the intrigue. Imagine aliens leaning over a lab bench, frowning at early humans, muttering, "Not bad, but let's give them language and see what happens." Or maybe time travelers from the future nudging evolution to make sure you exist at all. It's a paradoxical thought. What if your great-great-great-great-grandchildren built you? And here comes the joke you can't resist. If that's true, then technically, you're your own ancestor, which makes family reunions even more awkward than usual. Still, the gaps remain, and they aren't just in fossils. They're in the stories you tell yourself. Mythologies worldwide are full of half-human, half-divine figures, demigods, star children, culture bringers who descended, taught humans how to plant, how to write, how to build. You think of Prometheus stealing fire, of Quetzalcoatl bringing maize, of the Apkallu in Mesopotamia teaching irrigation. If you squint, these myths sound less like fantasy and more like field notes. A fringe tidbit that makes you tilt your head. The Sumerians, among the earliest civilizations, depicted gods called the Anunnaki, who supposedly shaped humanity. While mainstream scholars interpret this as myth, some fringe theorists whisper that the gods might have been engineers of a very different kind. Historians still argue whether ancient people were simply expressing awe at natural forces or documenting actual encounters. As you sit on a rock, watching the stars, you think about how fast humanity has advanced compared to the long, slow crawl of natural evolution. The dinosaurs had 165 million years and never invented Wi-Fi. Humans, in less than 2 million, went from stone chips to sending probes out of the solar system. It's like showing up late to a marathon and somehow sprinting past everyone else. Convenient, but suspicious. You sigh, half amused, half unsettled. If you really were placed here, maybe the missing link isn't missing at all. Maybe it was never meant to be written down. Maybe it's hidden on purpose, a kind of cosmic spoiler the zookeepers don't want you to see yet. Still, you feel the pull of curiosity, that restless itch humans can't seem to shake. Even in the dark, even with the fossil record as patchy as a badly shaved beard, You keep peering back, wondering what's behind the curtain. And maybe that's the real placement test. Not whether you were built or evolved, but whether you keep asking questions no matter what. You shuffle further down the path, the soil softer now, and feel the strangeness of your own species settling over you. You can't escape it. Humans are a bit too clever for their own good. You glance back at those supposed evolutionary leaps and realize how suspiciously fast things went from "let's rub two sticks together" to "let's build particle accelerators and send selfies to Mars." It's like someone hit the fast-forward button on human progress, and you're left dizzy from the sudden acceleration. Think about it. Language appeared, agriculture spread, and within the blink of geological time, you had cities, pyramids, and awkward teenage poetry. Historians still argue whether this pace was a natural curve of evolution or evidence of something more like a cosmic nudge. After all, if intelligence is so advantageous, why aren't dolphins already building skyscrapers and inventing TikTok dances? They've had longer to practice. Here's a mainstream fact for you. Anatomically modern humans emerged around 300,000 years ago. But written language, the stuff that locks ideas into place, only dates back about 5,000 years. That's a colossal gap of silent time. What were people doing all that while? Roaming, surviving, muttering stories around campfires. And then suddenly symbols appear, laws are carved, and calendars are tracked. Quicker than a late-night Amazon delivery, civilization lands on your doorstep. And then there's fire. Fire should have been harder to master. It burns, it bites, it runs wild. Yet humans not only tamed it but turned it into culture. Cooking made brains bigger, nights longer, and stories richer. Historians still argue whether fire's timing was an accident or if it arrived too conveniently, almost like someone slipped the recipe under the door. You smirk at the thought. Maybe humanity didn't stumble into progress. It was handed cheat codes. The leap from hunter-gatherer to farmer to iPhone addict doesn't feel entirely random. Quirky tidbit. There's actually a theory called the cultural Big Bang, describing how, about 40,000 years ago, humans suddenly exploded with art, jewelry, music, and elaborate rituals. Cave walls lit up with paintings, and seashell beads became the first bling. Some archaeologists scratch their heads and admit it's weird. One day rocks, the next day rock concerts. The fringe interpretations are almost irresistible. Some say humans were upgraded, genetically tweaked by visitors who grew impatient with your slow progress. Others suggest time travelers swooped in, making sure you reached the future where they already exist. And then there's the romantic idea that consciousness itself is contagious, like a spark that suddenly leapt between minds across continents, lighting everyone up at once. You let the thought sink in as you wander past tall grasses swaying in the night breeze. It's humbling, really. If you imagine evolution as a marathon, humans barely had time to tie their shoes before they sprinted ahead of everyone else. And maybe that's why you constantly feel out of sync. Too advanced for the planet that still throws hurricanes and volcanoes at you. A little joke slips in because you can't help it. Maybe aliens placed you here with a trial period, like a free software demo. Congratulations, you've unlocked agriculture. Upgrade to premium for interstellar travel. Your body reminds you of the irony. Even though your brain invented Wi-Fi, your spine still aches from sitting too long. You can calculate rocket trajectories but forget where you put your keys. This mismatch, this sense of being too advanced in some ways and hopelessly clumsy in others, makes you wonder if you're really designed for this environment at all. Still, the historical record keeps nudging you. Ancient Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization, saw writing, astronomy, and city-states rise almost overnight. How does humanity leap from herding goats to drafting complex legal codes? Historians still argue whether environmental pressures, trade routes, or sheer genius explain it, but the speed feels suspiciously like tutoring. The quirky detail that lingers in your mind. Some ancient cultures, like the Dogon of Mali, held star knowledge that modern astronomy only confirmed thousands of years later. Was it chance? Was it imagination? Or was it a sign that humanity had a little extra help scribbled in the margins? You keep walking, and the stars above twinkle almost knowingly. Maybe you're part of a grand experiment in acceleration, life hacked, streamlined, and optimized. Or maybe humans are just restless enough to push faster than anyone expected, always hungry, always chasing the next spark. Either way, the result is the same. You're standing here with skyscrapers behind you and galaxies above you, wondering how it all happened so quickly. Too smart, too fast, and perhaps a little too placed for comfort. You move along, deeper into the night, when the ground beneath your feet starts to feel older, heavier, almost buzzing with memory. Stone blocks, enormous and cold, lie scattered like puzzle pieces waiting for someone taller, stronger, or just plain weirder to fit them back together. And then it hits you. The age of gods descending from the skies. The age when humans were not just clever but seemingly instructed. You picture the pyramids, their smooth faces gleaming under a desert sun thousands of years ago. Ordinary farmers and stone haulers stare up, scratching their heads, trying to make sense of geometry that seems ahead of its time. You smirk because even now, with cranes, lasers, and GPS, you'd have trouble recreating those perfect angles. Historians still argue whether it was pure human engineering genius or if there's a missing chapter in the instruction manual. Mainstream fact: the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 4,500 years ago, and to this day, its precision astonishes. The base is nearly perfectly aligned to the cardinal directions, and the blocks, some weighing more than 70 tons, were somehow hauled, lifted, and placed with staggering accuracy. This isn't conspiracy, it's real, measurable craftsmanship. But that doesn't stop the whispers that maybe humanity had tutors. A quirky tidbit you can't ignore. In some myths, sky beings came down not just with divine fire, but with practical lessons: math, astronomy, irrigation, even the secret recipe for bread and beer. Kind of like cosmic professors on an extended field trip. The Egyptians credited Thoth with writing, the Mesopotamians credited the Anunnaki with shaping humans, and the Greeks whispered about Prometheus sneaking fire to humanity. What's funny is how similar these tales sound across cultures, like everyone was copying off the same cheat sheet. As you walk, you imagine one of those so-called gods hovering above the sand, dictating geometry in a voice as casual as someone giving directions to the grocery store. Yes, align the pyramid with Orion's belt. Trust me, it'll look great from above. You can't help but chuckle, because if aliens really were the architects, they had a flair for dramatic skylines. But the thought runs deeper. Why geometry? Why astronomy? Why do ancient sites so often line up with solstices, equinoxes, and star clusters? Historians still argue whether this was coincidence, religious devotion, or knowledge seeded by someone with a far better view of the galaxy. The placement of monuments feels less like a random cultural flourish and more like breadcrumbs. A fringe tidbit tickles your imagination. Some researchers claim the pyramids aren't just tombs but energy devices, resonating with the Earth itself. Others say they were beacons, markers that shouted, "Humans live here," across the stars. Whether you buy it or not, the idea adds spice to the mystery. You feel yourself almost hopping it's true, because how boring would it be if they were just oversized graves? You glance around the imagined desert, stars overhead, and feel the tug of connection. Ancient humans weren't staring into their phones. They were staring up, night after night, tracking the skies, waiting for patterns to speak. And sometimes those patterns looked a lot like visitors, Myths describe fiery chariots, winged serpents, gods who shone like the sun. If you translate those images through modern eyes, they don't sound too different from crafts burning through the atmosphere, leaving contrails of light. And here comes the joke. Maybe those gods weren't gods at all, but just really bossy engineers. No, build it taller. No, we don't care how many people you have to haul stones. Taller. It'll impress the neighbors. Still, the pyramids and other megaliths stand like eternal question marks, too precise to dismiss, too mysterious to fully explain. The irony. Humans today often underestimate their ancestors, assuming they couldn't possibly have managed such feats. But maybe that's exactly what the ancient builders wanted, to spark curiosity, to make you wonder whether they built alone. As the desert wind brushes your skin and your imagination, you feel the old stories settling into your bones. Whether gods, aliens, or just brilliant humans with endless patience, something, or someone taught humanity to build in ways that still boggle the mind. And maybe that was the point, to plant monuments so enduring they'd keep whispering across millennia, tugging at your thoughts tonight. You take a slow breath, gazing at the dark horizon. The sky gods, whoever they were, left their fingerprints in stone, in myth, and maybe in your very sense of wonder. And if you were placed here, then maybe they were the greeters, the first to hand you a blueprint and say, "Welcome to Earth. Now let's get building." The desert sands fade from under your feet, replaced by something smaller, more intimate, almost microscopic. You blink, and suddenly it's not stone blocks you're studying, but the twisting, spiraling staircase tucked inside every one of your cells. DNA, your blueprint, your origin story written in a language you can't quite pronounce. And here, where the thought sneaks in, what if that double helix wasn't entirely random? What if someone left a signature in the code? Mainstream fact: DNA is built from just 4 chemical letters, A, T, C, and G. And yet from those tiny combinations emerges everything from jellyfish to oak trees to you, sitting here, wondering if your bedtime snack was a bad idea. The odds of DNA arranging itself into conscious language making humans feel astronomical. Historians still argue whether this was purely chance, guided evolution, or something nudged along. And then comes the quirky tidbit. In 2013, a group of Kazakhstani scientists stirred up a storm by suggesting there might be a mathematical pattern embedded in human DNA, almost like a coded message. They even called it a cosmic signature. Mainstream geneticists rolled their eyes, of course, but the idea sticks, like graffiti scrawled on the walls of your chromosomes. Imagine zooming all the way in and finding a neat little engraving. Property of Intergalactic Life Seeding Corp. Do not remove tag. You laugh under your breath because it's so outrageous. But outrageous thoughts have a way of lingering. If you were placed here, maybe the proof isn't in pyramids or myths. It's inside you, quietly replicated billions of times in every cell, waiting for someone curious enough to decode it. Ancient myths play along too. Many cultures describe humans as clay molded and then given life through a breath or spark. The Sumerians told stories of gods mixing divine essence with earth. The Bible speaks of dust becoming man when God breathed into it. Historians still argue whether these tales are symbolic poetry or dim memories of something more literal. An upgrade, a splice, a coded touch. Here's a fringe tidbit to make you squirm a little. Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverers of DNA's structure, once entertained the idea of directed panspermia. Translation: life might have been deliberately seeded on Earth by an advanced civilization. It wasn't his final belief, but it was his playful nod to how improbable DNA seemed. If even Nobel Prize winners can toy with the idea of alien gardeners, you don't feel too guilty for thinking about it now. Picture it, a cosmic lab, Petri dishes spanning galaxies, and Earth just one experiment in a sprawling test field. You, the product of careful tweaks, running through the code like a program written with both genius and glitches. Maybe that explains why you can compose symphonies yet pull a muscle tying your shoe. You grin because it feels almost satirical. If someone designed humanity, they had a bizarre sense of humor. Who else would build a creature with wisdom teeth, fragile knees, and an uncontrollable urge to invent bureaucracy? It's as though your genetic code was scribbled by a prankster who wanted to see how much chaos could fit into 3 billion base pairs. Still, there's a haunting beauty in the possibility. What if the so-called signature is real, not a literal inscription, but a pattern too elegant to dismiss? Imagine discovering one day that your DNA contains not just instructions for proteins, but also an intentional mathematical sequence, a universal calling card that says, "You are not alone. You never were." The thought slows you down, softens you. If the code carries a signature, then you are a message written in flesh and blood, carrying across time like a bottle drifting in a cosmic sea. Whoever placed you here didn't just build a body, they built a message, one that could only be read once you were clever enough to look inward. You gaze up at the stars again, but this time you feel like you're also gazing inward, into your very molecules. Outside and inside blur, and the suspicion grows. Maybe the biggest monument left for you wasn't carved in stone, but curled up inside your cells, whispering the secret of where you came from. The stars overhead feel closer tonight, almost leaning down to listen as you walk. Your thoughts drift outward, past the atmosphere, past the moon's bright face, until they land on that smaller, rust-colored neighbor, Mars. You picture it hanging there in the dark, a dusty sphere with scars of rivers long gone, dry valleys etched like wrinkles in its ancient skin. And here's the itch that won't go away. What if Mars wasn't always barren? What if it was your older brother, the first place where you were placed, before Earth became the backup plan? Mainstream fact: evidence shows Mars once had liquid water, oceans, lakes, even rainfall. NASA's rovers have photographed riverbeds and minerals that only form in wet conditions. Billions of years ago, Mars might have been blue, not red, with a thick atmosphere and maybe even life. Historians still argue whether microbes once wriggled in Martian seas, or if the planet was always a tease, holding out promise but never quite delivering. The quirky tidbit that makes you pause: some meteorites found on Earth are believed to have originated on Mars, blasted off by ancient impacts and eventually landing here. In 1996, one such rock, ALH 84001, was claimed to show fossilized bacteria. The claim is still debated, but just imagine it. Martian microbes hitchhiking across space, seeding Earth. Maybe that's not coincidence. Maybe that's how the family moved neighborhoods. You sit in the red dust in your mind, running your hands through it. What if humans, or at least your raw ingredients, started here on Mars? Maybe a civilization thrived, then collapsed as the atmosphere thinned and the planet froze. The survivors, desperate, might have launched their genetic essence toward Earth, packing it into comets, capsules, or even coded signals woven into DNA. A cosmic evacuation disguised as evolution. Fringe theorists love this story. Some claim humans are not native to Earth because you're poorly adapted, burn too easily in sunlight, struggle with childbirth, and suffer back pain from a spine not perfectly suited to this gravity. Historians still argue whether that's just biology being clumsy or whether it's evidence you were designed for somewhere else, maybe a place with weaker sunlight and lighter pull. Mars fits suspiciously well. And here, where the comedy sneaks in. If Mars really was your home, then technically you're already an alien. Congratulations, you've been living on Earth like an unannounced houseguest for 300,000 years. No wonder you always feel a little out of place. The mythology echoes the suspicion, too. The Romans named Mars after their god of war, but older traditions linked it with birth, blood, and primal origins. Some cultures described star people coming down to Earth in fiery chariots, which you could easily picture as launches from a red, glowing sky. Was Mars not just a planet but a half-remembered homeland? A quirky note: telescopes in the 19th century convinced some astronomers that Mars had canals, vast artificial structures. Of course, modern science debunked that, showing it was optical illusion. But the idea of Martians building irrigation ditches stuck in pop culture, giving rise to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds and decades of green alien jokes. Maybe the illusion wasn't proof, but maybe it wasn't entirely wrong either. Just a distorted glimpse of lost structures buried under dust. You tilt your head, imagining an ancient Martian gazing at Earth through their own primitive telescope. Would they have seen the green and blue glow and whispered, "That will be our next home"? Maybe they seeded the oceans with life, set the clock, and then faded into myth. If so, then humans are not Earth's children at all, you're its adopted tenants. It makes you chuckle. All the debates about Martians invading Earth miss the possibility that you are the Martians, just very forgetful ones. And maybe, buried under Antarctica's ice or hidden in Martian caves, there's a dusty archive of records waiting to tell you the truth. For now, though, you just let the thought wrap around you like Martian dust swirling in the thin wind. You feel less like a creature bound to one planet and more like a traveler caught between worlds. Whether or not you were placed here, Earth may only be the latest stop in a much longer journey. The dusty winds of Mars fade, and suddenly you're standing in a quiet library. Not modern, with fluorescent lights and barcode scanners, but ancient, the kind where clay tablets lie stacked like bricks, and reed styluses scratch symbols into wet earth. The air smells faintly of smoke and oil lamps. You brush your fingers over cuneiform lines, the world's first writing, and find yourself whispering, "The Sumerians knew too much." Mainstream fact: the Sumerians, living in Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago, invented writing, irrigation systems, wheeled vehicles, and even schools. They mapped the stars with eerie precision, dividing the sky into constellations, tracking planets, and inventing a 12-month calendar still echoed today. Historians still argue whether their astronomical knowledge was simply sharp observation or something stranger, because they recorded details that seem oddly ahead of their time. One quirky tidbit stands out. Sumerian tablets describe the planet Venus with surprising accuracy, noting its visibility cycles in a way modern science only confirmed with advanced observation. They also depicted the solar system in a seal showing the sun at the center, long before Copernicus, long before telescopes. You raise an eyebrow. Coincidence? Or a borrowed glimpse of someone else's star charts? And then the fringe whispers creep in. According to Sumerian myth, humanity was created by beings called the Anunnaki, who supposedly descended from the heavens. They didn't just bring thunderbolts, they brought agriculture, laws, and maybe even genetic tinkering. Some translations describe them mixing the essence of gods with clay to make human servants, which sounds an awful lot like early bioengineering. Whether metaphor or memory, it's unsettling. Historians still argue whether these tales are mythological allegory or distorted accounts of real encounters. You can't help but chuckle at the irony. Imagine cosmic visitors going through all the trouble of crossing the stars only to teach humans how to irrigate barley fields. Behold, mortals, here is the secret of beer brewing. Honestly, not the worst divine gift. The tablets also describe a planet called Nibiru, a supposed 12th body in the solar system, with a long elliptical orbit. Mainstream scholars dismiss it as myth, a symbol of cosmic order. but fringe theorists insist it could be a lost world, perhaps the home of those who placed humanity here. You tilt your head, imagining a massive planet swinging back around every few thousand years, bringing with it not just gravitational chaos but memories of your origin. The Sumerians weren't alone in their suspicious knowledge. Their neighbors in Babylon tracked eclipses with such precision that modern astronomers still admire their data. And the Mayans, half a world away, devised calendars so accurate they could outlast modern leap year corrections. Different lands, different tongues, yet the same eerie competence with the heavens. Was it all just human genius flowering early, or was there tutoring from beyond? You imagine a Sumerian priest gazing up at the stars, stylus in hand, whispering symbols that seem dictated by voices from above. Maybe it was divine inspiration, or maybe someone literally pointed out the constellations, like a cosmic tour guide saying, "That cluster, that's Orion, write it down." The quirky charm of the Sumerians is how casual their tablets are. Among epic tales of gods and creation, you also find receipts, love poems, and laundry lists. You grin, thinking, even if aliens did help humanity, people still had to remember who owed them goats. Advanced star charts and petty accounting, side by side. But the weight of it lingers. If you were placed here, maybe the Sumerians were the first to realize it, the first to write it down, the first to carve humanity's suspicions into stone. And maybe that's why their myths keep echoing, their gods keep reappearing in modern theories, and their symbols still tug at your imagination tonight. You walk away from the library in your mind, the clay dust clinging to your fingers. The tablets remain behind, silent, patient, whispering across millennia. We knew more than we should have, and we left you clues. The clay tablets fade from your fingertips, and when you look up, the night sky is dominated not by distant stars, but by one luminous, familiar face. The moon. Pale, constant, impossibly round, it hangs there like a lantern deliberately hung to guide your path. You exhale because the more you think about it, the weirder the moon gets. Too close, too bright, too perfectly placed. If you were indeed placed here, maybe the moon came with a package deal. Mainstream fact: the moon is unusually large compared to Earth, about a quarter of its diameter. Most planets don't get such outsized satellites, and Earth's moon isn't just big, it's placed just so, perfectly positioned to cause total solar eclipses, where the moon covers the sun with uncanny precision. Historians still argue whether that's a lucky cosmic coincidence or something with deeper meaning, because it's a level of precision that looks suspiciously deliberate. Here's the quirky tidbit that tilts your head. The moon is moving away from Earth about 1.5 inches per year, which means in the deep past, eclipses were bigger and brighter, and in the far future, they'll stop happening altogether. You just happen to be alive in the rare window where the geometry is perfect. Statistically, that's like stumbling into a theater during the exact 5 minutes of the movie when the plot twist happens. Convenient. Maybe too convenient. Scientists say the moon formed after a Mars-sized body slammed into Earth billions of years ago, scattering debris that eventually coalesced into the sphere you see today. But some researchers have quietly admitted the math doesn't line up neatly. The moon's density is off, its orbit peculiar, and its composition strangely similar to Earth's crust. Some fringe theorists even suggest it's hollow, a claim fueled by seismic experiments during the Apollo missions, when the moon rang like a bell after impacts. You chuckle nervously. A hollow moon? That sounds less like an accident of nature and more like architecture. Imagine it as a vast shell, perhaps an observation post or an ark placed here long ago. Welcome to Earth. Complimentary moon included. Enjoy your eclipses. And the myths, oh, they don't help. Ancient peoples often spoke of a time before the moon. Some Native American and African traditions remember when the sky was empty of its silver lamp. The Greeks told stories of Prosling, before the moon, and the Zulu called it the age before the sky received its second eye. Historians still argue whether these myths were symbolic or echoes of a genuine memory. Either way, they stir something uneasy inside you. Picture it: Earth without the moon. No tides, no eclipse shows, no stabilizing hand to steady the planet's tilt. Without it, Earth's climate would lurch chaotically. Maybe life itself wouldn't have thrived. Which means, if you were placed here, then the moon might have been part of the setup, an accessory deliberately installed to keep the stage steady. And here's the funny part. For centuries, poets and lovers have sighed at the moon, writing odes and songs, but maybe they've just been serenading a giant cosmic construction project. Imagine all those romantic lines accidentally aimed at alien engineers. "Oh, lovely moon," you whisper, and somewhere a distant species snickers, "Thanks, we built it ourselves." Still, the moon's presence comforts you. Even as its weirdness unsettles, it glows like a guardian lamp, steady and ancient. If it's artificial, it's at least benevolent. If it's natural, it's the luckiest accident you'll ever know. Either way, it feels too perfect to ignore, a reminder that your placement here, on this stage with this lighting, might not be entirely random. You keep staring up, caught between awe and suspicion. The moon looks back, silent, unblinking, almost like an eye keeping watch. And you can't decide if that makes you feel safe or very, very observed. The moon slips behind a cloud in your mind's sky, and suddenly you feel the tug of time itself. Not just the steady tick of your watch, but the elastic, looping, headache-inducing strangeness of time travel. You pause, hands in your pockets, wondering, what if the beings who placed you here weren't aliens at all, but future humans? The ultimate plot twist: you were seated not by strangers, but by your own descendants. Mainstream fact: physics doesn't forbid time travel. Einstein's relativity allows for time dilation, wormholes, even closed time-like curves where effects loop back on causes. Scientists admit it's theoretically possible, though practically about as easy as fitting a sofa through a cat flap. Still, the door isn't shut. Historians still argue whether myths of gods and sky visitors could actually be misunderstood encounters with humans from the far future, circling back to make sure their timeline exists. The quirky tidbit that makes your eyebrows rise. In 2000, a man calling himself John Titor appeared on early internet forums, claiming to be a time traveler from 2036. He dropped predictions, some laughably wrong, some eerily close, and vanished. Most dismiss him as a hoax, but his story sparked fascination. What if humanity really does have the ability to loop back? And what if those loops don't just involve one person, but entire civilizations seeding their own past? Imagine it, humanity in the distant future, star-faring and almost unrecognizable, looking back at their origins and realizing the line doesn't connect cleanly. A missing link. A collapse, a mistake. So they return, not to observe, not to conquer, but to plant themselves, to tweak DNA, to whisper agriculture into the ears of wandering nomads. They don't just place you here. They replace you here, patching history so that their own existence remains intact. It makes your head spin. If that's true, then you're both ancestor and descendant, the snake eating its own tail, the Ouroboros of history. You smile at the cosmic absurdity. Family reunions would be unbearable. Hey, meet your great-great-great-great-grandchild. They also happen to be your creator. Thanksgiving dinner just got complicated. But myths support the vibe. So many ancient cultures describe gods who were strangely human. They weren't ethereal spirits, but figures with bodies, emotions, and sometimes questionable choices. They taught math, punished hubris, and occasionally fell in love with mortals. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect anthropomorphism or half-remembered encounters with people who looked suspiciously like us, because maybe they were us, just wearing shinier outfits. Fringe theorists point to odd artifacts as evidence. Out-of-place items like the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device that functioned like a mechanical computer, or the Baghdad battery, which looks eerily like a primitive electrical cell. Mainstream archaeology has explanations, but fringe voices whisper. Are these the breadcrumbs left behind by time-traveling humans, accidentally dropping their gadgets while visiting? You can almost see it. Future engineers peeking out from shimmering machines, slipping advice to pyramid builders, tossing coded star maps into Sumerian myths, and then vanishing again before they disrupt the timeline too much. Cosmic tutors with a personal stake, because if they don't guide you, they risk erasing themselves. And the strangest part, it means you weren't placed here as an experiment by strangers, but as part of a rescue mission by your own bloodline. Humanity babysitting itself across centuries. You grin at the humor in it. Humans are notoriously bad at babysitting toddlers, yet here they are, possibly babysitting entire civilizations. Bold strategy. Still, the thought lingers. If the time travel plantation theory is true, then you aren't just surviving history. You're caught in a loop of it, living out a carefully tended garden that ensures the gardeners themselves can exist. You are both seed and soil, both past and future. As you walk on, the air around you feels thicker, like time itself is wrapping close, reminding you that the line from then to now might not be a line at all. It might be a circle, and you're walking it, one step at a time. You slow your steps, noticing how the night air feels heavier, like you've wandered into a room you don't entirely belong in. That feeling isn't new, it's one you've carried since childhood. A strange itch in the back of your mind, an unsettled hum in your chest. Call it alienation, call it wanderlust, call it what it really is, the outsider instinct. The quiet suspicion that maybe Earth isn't your true home, or at least not the place you were meant to fit perfectly. Mainstream fact. Psychologists have long studied this sensation of estrangement. It shows up in literature as far back as ancient Greece, where philosophers wrote about the human condition as one of exile, of being strangers in the cosmos. Historians still argue whether this universal feeling of dislocation is spiritual angst, cultural displacement, or just the brain's way of coping with awareness of mortality. Whatever the cause, it's suspiciously common. Why do so many humans feel like tourists on their own planet? A quirky tidbit floats in. There's an entire modern internet subculture of people convinced they're star seeds, souls supposedly incarnated from other planets or dimensions, placed here with a mission to raise consciousness. Most dismiss it as new age fluff, but it echoes something old, maybe even primal. The longing for elsewhere. The sense that your passport is missing a stamp. You look at your own body, and the outsider instinct deepens. You sunburn too easily. Your lower back aches after standing too long. You need clothes to survive winter. Compared to other animals, you seem bizarrely ill-equipped for Earth's conditions. Historians still argue whether these quirks are just evolutionary trade-offs or signs that humanity is maladapted to its environment, as if you were designed for a slightly different world. One with weaker sunlight, fewer allergens, and a gentler pull of gravity. Mars, anyone. You grin at the irony. Dolphins are sleekly adapted to water, polar bears thrive in blizzards, and cockroaches are basically apocalypse-proof. Humans. You invent HVAC systems and SPF 50 sunscreen just to make it through July. If that doesn't scream outsider, what does? And yet this alienation has fueled art, philosophy, and religion. Myths are full of figures who don't belong, wandering heroes, fallen angels, trickster gods. It's as though humanity's collective imagination keeps replaying the theme. We came from elsewhere. We don't quite fit here. maybe those aren't just metaphors. Maybe they're faint echoes of truth. Fringe whispers suggest this outsider instinct is the residue of memory, ancestral, cellular, even cosmic. A kind of homesickness for a place you can't name. Maybe it's Mars. Maybe it's another star system. Maybe it's nowhere and everywhere. What if the very fact you feel like an outsider is the biggest clue that you are one? The funny part, even on Earth, humans never stop making themselves outsiders. You invent borders, languages, fashions, clubs. You exile, you immigrate, you move towns, you start over. It's as though something in your wiring craves the experience of not belonging, of seeking a place that will finally feel right. Joke on you, though maybe that place doesn't exist, or maybe you already left it behind. You pause, listening to the cicadas hum. The outsider instinct doesn't feel sad right now. It feels like a companion, like an old friend tugging at your sleeve, reminding you that curiosity is born from displacement. You question, you explore, precisely because you don't feel entirely at home. If you were perfectly adapted to Earth, maybe you'd never look up at the stars at all. So you breathe deep, accepting the outsider hum as part of you. If you were placed here, maybe the placement was never meant to make you comfortable. Maybe it was meant to keep you searching, restless, never quite satisfied. Outsiders always make the best explorers. The cicadas fade, and now you sense a different kind of hum. Something metallic, distant, almost like static in the sky. You tilt your head, eyes tracing the horizon, and the thought lands heavy. They've never really left, have they? The UFOs, the watchers, the lights that dart in and out of human history. From cave paintings to TikTok footage, there's always been something hovering just out of reach. Mainstream fact. Sightings of strange aerial objects stretch back centuries. In 1561, citizens of Nuremberg reported fiery shapes battling in the skies, spheres, crosses, cylinders filling the dawn. Historians still argue whether it was mass hallucination, religious metaphor, or an actual aerial event. Whatever it was, the descriptions eerily echo modern reports of unidentified craft. Quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest cave art, dating back 30,000 years, includes stick-like figures with round helmets and radiating lines. Mainstream archaeologists interpret these as shamans or symbolic beings, but fringe voices insist they look suspiciously like astronauts. Maybe the UFOs have always been here, just updating their wardrobe as centuries pass. You smile, half amused. Imagine aliens with the patience of immortal babysitters, watching humanity stumble from spears to smartphones. Every few centuries, they poke their heads in, leave a glowing dot in the sky, then retreat before anyone can get too good a photo. Don't mind us, just checking the experiment. Carry on with your agriculture. But then the laughter fades, because some sightings aren't so easy to shrug off. During World War II, pilots reported Foo Fighters, glowing orbs that zipped alongside planes, moving far beyond known technology. In 2004, Navy pilots tracked the now famous Tic Tac object blindingly fast, maneuvering without wings or exhaust. These aren't just blurry farmer photos. They're radar-tracked anomalies that make seasoned military officers scratch their heads. Historians still argue whether UFOs are atmospheric quirks, secret human tech, or genuine visitors. Yet the persistence of the phenomenon is what unsettles you. It's not one event. It's a steady thread woven through time, as though humanity is under ongoing surveillance. Not invasion, not contact, just observation. And here comes the joke you can't resist. If UFOs are real, then their operators must be the worst communicators in the galaxy. Thousands of years of flybys and still not a single clear PowerPoint presentation. Hi Earth, here's our mission statement. No, just blips and lights. The ultimate slow burn. Still, you can't shake the feeling that these appearances are deliberate. Just enough to remind you they're there, never enough to prove it. Like nudging a goldfish and then pulling your finger away. Maybe it's part of the placement, a way to make sure you never forget that you might not be alone. You pause to consider another angle. What if UFOs aren't extraterrestrials at all, but the zookeepers from earlier making their rounds? The same watchers who nudged evolution, whispered geometry, and maybe even installed the moon. They've never left because they can't. You're their project, their exhibit, their ongoing experiment. And they don't want to abandon you, not yet. The myths play along too. Ezekiel's biblical wheel within a wheel, fiery chariots across the heavens, sky boats in Polynesian stories, and feathered serpents descending in Mesoamerica. Across cultures, across eras, humans keep describing the same thing: strange craft in the sky, bringing knowledge, warning, or awe. Historians still argue whether these are just symbolic visions or records of actual encounters, but the echoes are loud. As you keep walking, the stars above seem to shimmer. Maybe it's just your eyes adjusting, but part of you wonders if one of those dots is moving, watching, hovering. You feel the tingle of being observed, the same sensation that's followed you since childhood when you looked up at the night sky and swore something was up there. And maybe there is. Maybe the watchers never really left because they were never visitors in the first place. Maybe they've always been part of the placement package, built-in guardians or researchers or pranksters, keeping tabs until humanity is ready for whatever comes next. You take a breath, slow and steady. Comfort mixes with unease. The UFOs might never explain themselves, but their persistence whispers one undeniable truth: you are not, and have never been, entirely alone. You walk on, the air thickening as though the world itself is leaning in to whisper. The thought from before, that you're being watched, shifts slightly. It's not just observation anymore. The feeling is sharper, more personal. You're not only inside a zoo, you're inside a laboratory. You pause mid-stride, the idea crawling under your skin. What if humanity isn't just placed here to live, but placed here to be shaped? Mainstream fact: selective breeding has always been part of human culture. From wolves into dogs, from wild grass into golden wheat, humans have tinkered with the genes of other species for thousands of years. It's not much of a leap to flip that thought around. If you can engineer creatures, who's to say someone hasn't been engineering you? Historians still argue whether ancient leaps in intelligence, agriculture, or culture were natural explosions or signs of deliberate nudges from above. Quirky tidbit: there's a story tucked in the old book of Enoch, one left out of many Bibles, about watchers descending to Earth, teaching humans forbidden arts and even breeding with them to create hybrid beings. Fringe theorists seize on this, suggesting it's less myth and more lab report. Supervisors who got too attached to their test subjects. You picture it now. The zoo becomes a lab. The sky gods aren't just teachers, they're scientists clipping DNA, whispering ideas into dreams, adjusting environments just enough to push the experiment forward. Add a little ice age here, a little drought there, see how they adapt. Cold, clinical, but also invested. Because if you're the experiment, then every war, every invention, every awkward first date might be a data point. The thought is absurd and you laugh nervously. Imagine filling out a lab notebook. Subject H231 invented memes. Results inconclusive. Subject H231 also burned toast 3 times today. Possible defect in hand-eye coordination. It's both terrifying and ridiculous, and yet, doesn't it explain why you've always felt guided and hindered at the same time? History offers plenty of fuel. Ancient myths speak of gods descending to lay down laws, to demand offerings, to tweak human behavior. Flood stories appear across cultures, describing resets, massive cleanups of the experiment before starting fresh. Historians still argue whether these are purely symbolic tales of survival or distorted memories of deliberate interventions. But the pattern is there: creation, correction, reset. Like someone isn't just letting you run wild. And then the modern sightings, the UFOs watching quietly, suddenly make sense in a darker way. They're not joyrides, they're checkups. The equivalent of lab coats leaning over a microscope, adjusting the Petri dish, never letting the culture overgrow. When you think of it like that, those glowing lights don't look curious, they look clinical. Yet you feel a strange comfort in it too, because if you are the experiment, then you're not forgotten. You're being monitored, adjusted, maybe even protected from total collapse. Perhaps every time you veer too close to self-destruction, something nudges you back. Nuclear crises averted, diseases conquered, disasters that could have been worse than they were. Coincidence or course correction? And here, where the humor pokes in because you need it. If you really are in a lab, then humans might be the universe's longest-running group project. And just like any group project, half of you are working hard, and the other half are Googling funny cat videos. Imagine the frustration of your cosmic supervisors. Still, the implications settle heavily. You weren't placed here to be free. You were placed here to be studied, adjusted, shaped. Every monument, every myth, every inexplicable leap might be less about human brilliance and more about external edits. You don't know if that makes you feel special or small, maybe both. You glance upward. If there are scientists out there watching, then tonight's stroll, this very thought, what if we were placed here, might be part of the data they've been waiting for. Awareness itself could be the next stage of the experiment. And you smile, a little wry, a little weary. If that's true, then congratulations, you've just passed another test. The idea of being watched and shaped lingers, but then your mind drifts inward, into the quiet space that opens each night when you close your eyes. Dreams. They're slippery things, stitched together from memory and nonsense, but sometimes they carry symbols too precise, too alien to feel like random brain static. You've had them yourself, waking with equations you don't understand, images of star maps you've never seen, whispers in languages you don't speak. What if those dreams aren't yours at all? What if they're downloads? Mainstream fact. Neuroscientists say dreams are the brain's way of consolidating memory, testing scenarios, and cleaning up clutter. You file paperwork by day, you dream about flying fish at night. But still, the exact purpose of dreaming remains mysterious. Historians still argue whether dreams are merely survival tools or glimpses into something deeper, something beyond the brain's housekeeping. A quirky tidbit: Nikola Tesla, the eccentric inventor, claimed many of his ideas came to him fully formed in visions and dreamlike states. He once described seeing detailed blueprints of machines in his mind before building them. Was that pure genius? Or transmissions slipping in while his conscious defenses were down? You grin at the thought, Tesla as humanity's most enthusiastic Wi-Fi receiver. And then there's you. Those nights when you dream of places you've never been, cities carved from crystal, skis with too many moons. Or those uncanny dreams where you wake up humming a tune that didn't exist yesterday. What if those are the breadcrumbs of placement? Not fantasies, but reminders. Or maybe updates like software patches beamed directly into your subconscious. Myths across cultures treat dreams seriously. Ancient Greeks believed God spoke through dreams. Native American traditions honored dreams as visions and guidance. Even in modern times, people swear by prophetic dreams that seem to warn or teach. Historians still argue whether these accounts are coincidence or whether dreams have always been a channel of communication. Fringe theorists go further. They suggest dreams are portals, moments when the mind slips out of Earth's grid and reconnects with something larger. Call it a database, call it an alien network, call it the Wi-Fi of the cosmos. The zookeepers, the lab coats, the watchers. Maybe they upload lessons while you're too distracted to resist. And when you wake, you shrug it off as weird brain fog, never realizing you've just been updated. You laugh quietly because it makes sense in a twisted way. Humans do love multitasking. Why not evolve sleep to serve both rest and remote downloads? Dream storage and software updates in one package. Efficiency at its finest. But then the unease sneaks in. If some of your dreams aren't yours, then how much of you is really you? Did you invent that idea, that song, that vision? Or was it planted? If you were placed here, maybe the placement is ongoing, maintained every night through quiet whispers that shape your path. And yet, there's comfort too. Dreams can be beautiful. They can remind you of loved ones gone, of landscapes that soothe, of possibilities your waking self never dares to imagine. If those are downloads, then whoever sends them isn't just tinkering with you. They're giving you art, comfort, wonder. You tilt your head back, eyes half closed, remembering your last strange dream. Maybe it was nonsense. Maybe it was more. Either way, it reminds you of this truth. The borders between worlds aren't as sharp as you think. Waking and sleeping, Earth and elsewhere, you and the ones who placed you here, they blur, and in that blur, messages slip through. So tonight, when you drift off, maybe you'll listen a little closer. Not every whisper is random static. Some of them might be breadcrumbs left to guide you home. The dream static fades, and when you open your eyes again, your hands are running along something rough and cold. Stone. Not just any stone, massive blocks, weathered by time yet impossibly precise, fitted together so tightly you couldn't slide a credit card between them. You look around and you're standing among the stone puzzles scattered across Earth. Stonehenge, Puma Punku, Göbekli Tepe, the temples of Baalbek. Megaliths that hum with a mystery as heavy as their weight. Mainstream fact: some of these sites are jaw-droppingly old. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey dates back nearly 12,000 years, older than agriculture, older than writing, older than your favorite conspiracy documentaries. And yet, its carved pillars are aligned with the stars. Historians still argue whether hunter-gatherers really built it on their own, or whether something or someone helped. The quirky tidbit that makes you shake your head. At Baalbek in Lebanon lies the stone of the pregnant woman, a block weighing over 1,000 tons, quarried but never moved. Modern cranes would struggle to shift it, yet somehow, ancient builders were carving and maneuvering stones that make today's equipment look like toy trucks. Were they just incredibly stubborn, or was there an unrecorded trick? You crouch beside the stones in your mind, fingers tracing the perfect joins of Puma Punku in Bolivia. The cuts are so sharp, the angles so clean, it looks less like chiseling and more like machine work. Mainstream archaeology shrugs, saying it's craftsmanship pushed to the extreme. Fringe voices mutter about lost technology or outside instruction. Historians still argue, leaving you caught between admiration and suspicion. And then there's Stonehenge. Those standing stones aligned with solstices, catching the sunrise and sunset like a cosmic calendar. You imagine ancient people gathering, chanting, watching the sun's path marked by shadows and stone. Was it religion, science, or both? If you were placed here, maybe these monuments were meant as messages to your future self, billboards that scream across millennia, "We knew something. We left you proof." You chuckle because if they really are messages, they're about as cryptic as leaving IKEA instructions without the little cartoon man. Here's some giant rocks. Figure it out. Still, the precision gnaws at you. These aren't sloppy piles. They're deliberate, intentional, and enduring. Why build so big unless you wanted the message to last longer than memory itself? Paper burns, wood rots, but stone lingers. Maybe the stones are less about function and more about permanence. A library in plain sight, written in granite and basalt. Fringe tidbit. Some researchers propose that megalithic sites were not only aligned with stars but built to resonate, to hum with sound. Stone chambers that echo, pillars that vibrate. Imagine them as giant tuning forks, connecting Earth's rhythms with something beyond. Not just monuments, but instruments. If that's true, then these places weren't just ceremonial, they were communicative. Earth talking to the sky. You pause, feeling the quiet pulse of the stones in your imagination. Maybe they're not puzzles for you to solve, but mirrors reminding you of your own mystery. You touch the ancient cuts and wonder, who touched them before you? Whose hands shaped this? Were they ordinary humans, stretching the limits of skill, or were they guided, nudged, placed? The outsider instinct from before hums louder here. The stones feel familiar in a way they shouldn't. You've never built a megalith, yet some part of you feels you could. As if the knowledge sits buried in your DNA, waiting for recall. And maybe that's the point. Maybe these stone puzzles aren't about how they were built, but about how they make you feel. Small, curious, connected, placed within a pattern too large to see but too precise to dismiss. You take a step back, the monument towering above you, and smile. If you ever doubted being placed here, these stones laugh gently at your skepticism. They're too heavy to move, too precise to ignore, too ancient to explain away. They whisper in their silent weight, "We were here. You are not alone, and neither were we." Your hands fall away from the stone, and you're left standing in your own body again. The shift is almost jarring, because suddenly the focus isn't on monuments or myths, it's on you. Flesh, bone, and the odd little quirks that make being human a daily comedy. You stretch your back, wince a little, and mutter under your breath, "This design is not great." If someone placed you here, they either rushed the prototype or had a wicked sense of humor. Mainstream fact: your spine is a relic of four-legged ancestors. It curves awkwardly when forced upright, leaving you prone to slip discs, scoliosis, and the universal "my back hurts" chorus of adulthood. Historians still argue whether standing tall was worth the trade-off. Sure, you got hands freed up for tool use, but you also inherited chronic pain. If evolution was a design team, ergonomics was not their strongest department. And that's just the start. Your skin burns in sunlight more easily than most mammals. Your teeth overcrowd your jaw, leading to wisdom teeth that have to be yanked like useless code. You need shoes to protect your tender feet, clothes to survive the cold, and a whole pharmacy aisle to keep allergies at bay. Quirky tidbit: humans are one of the few species that regularly choke on food because your airway and esophagus share space. Who thought that was a good idea? It makes you laugh, but the laughter is tinged with suspicion. If you were designed for Earth, shouldn't you fit a little better? Shouldn't you handle the UV index without SPF 50? Shouldn't childbirth, one of the most fundamental processes, be less dangerous? Historians still argue whether these flaws are just evolutionary compromises or evidence that humans are maladapted, out of place on their own planet. Some fringe thinkers whisper, maybe you weren't built for Earth at all. Maybe you came from somewhere with weaker sunlight, fewer allergens, gentler gravity. Your aches and sneezes are cosmic homesickness, written into muscle and bone. Mars pops back into your mind, but so do distant stars, worlds you've never seen but might secretly remember. You grin despite yourself. Imagine filling out a customer service complaint. "Hello, yes, I'd like to report that my human body model overheats in summer, cracks in winter, and produces lower back pain by age 30. Is there a warranty?" And yet, for all its flaws, your body does incredible things. You heal, you adapt, you run marathons, you compose symphonies, you laugh until your ribs hurt. Maybe the flaws aren't signs of bad design, but reminders that you were hacked together quickly, placed here in a hurry, like a survival kit tossed into a storm. Enough to function, not enough to thrive without effort. Myths nod at this too. Many creation stories describe humans as fragile, incomplete, or flawed. In Greek myth, Prometheus gave humans fire because they were too weak to survive otherwise. In some Native American tales, humans were created last, after animals, and needed gifts from each creature to balance their shortcomings. Even in the Bible, Adam and Eve are exiled into a world where survival suddenly requires sweat, pain, and toil. Historians still argue whether these are moral lessons or subtle acknowledgments that humanity doesn't quite fit its environment. You run a hand along your arm, feeling the goosebumps rise, and wonder, if you were placed here, maybe the imperfections are part of the experiment. A way to keep you striving, restless, never too comfortable. If you had been perfectly designed, maybe you would have grown lazy. Instead, you invent clothes, shelter, medicine, civilization itself to compensate. Your flaws fuel your progress. It's a little cruel, a little clever. The bastard design that makes you ache is also the spark that makes you create. The weaknesses are levers, pushing you forward. You take a slow breath, settling into your imperfect body. Yes, it aches. Yes, it sunburns. Yes, it feels mismatched. But it also carries you, awkward prototype though it is, through a world that constantly challenges you to adapt. And maybe that's exactly what you were placed here to do. The ache in your spine lingers as you walk, but soon the scenery around you changes again. The warmth of deserts and jungles fades, replaced by a sharp, clean chill. Your breath fogs, the crunch of ice echoes underfoot, and the world goes white. Antarctica, a place so empty and forbidding it feels like another planet. And yet, your mind whispers, maybe it isn't just ice and penguins. Maybe under this frozen shell lies something far older, a vault. Mainstream fact: Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Millions of years ago, it hosted forests, rivers, and even dinosaurs. Fossilized ferns and petrified wood still lie buried beneath the ice. And radar scans in recent decades have revealed mountains, valleys, and even freshwater lakes sealed away under miles of ice. Lake Vostok, for example, has been isolated for millions of years, untouched by sunlight, harboring who knows what in its hidden waters. Historians still argue whether this continent hides just untouched geology or secrets of a very different kind. The quirky tidbit that makes you shiver a little. In 2016, satellite images showed strange hexagonal and dome-like shapes beneath the ice, sparking theories of buried structures. Mainstream science explains them as natural rock formations or glitches in the data, but fringe voices whisper that Antarctica may conceal ruins, ships, even alien technology deliberately buried. After all, if you were placing humanity on Earth, wouldn't you leave a launch pad or storage unit nearby, hidden but reachable once the species matures? You chuckle softly, picturing Antarctica as Earth's cosmic junk closet. Don't open until humanity hits level 10. Maybe beneath all that ice sits a vault of forgotten tools, maps, even instructions. Or maybe it's just rocks. But isn't it strange how treaties forbid military activity there, and how expeditions always seem to skirt the deepest, most mysterious parts? Coincidence, or careful management of the experiment? Myths hint at it too. Ancient maps like the Piri Reis chart, drawn in the 1500s, seem to depict Antarctica's coastline without ice. Historians still argue whether that was guesswork, coincidence, or proof that someone saw the continent long before modern exploration. Fringe theorists seize on it. If Antarctica was known before it froze, maybe it hosted something worth recording, something civilization wasn't supposed to forget. And then there's the conspiracy lore that snowballs into legend. Whispers of Nazi bases hidden beneath the ice, tales of crashed saucers retrieved and whisked away, stories of explorers stumbling across warm caverns and vanishing without explanation. You smirk because it all sounds like pulp fiction, and yet there's always a flicker of unease. The ice is so thick, so impenetrable that almost anything could be hiding under it. You imagine trudging deeper, frost stinging your cheeks, until you find an entrance carved into ice. A dark corridor leading to a chamber humming faintly, filled with relics not quite human. Stone tablets etched with star maps. Metallic frameworks too advanced for their supposed age. Maybe even a slumbering machine waiting to wake when humanity finally proves itself. And the joke sneaks in because your brain won't let it go. If there is a vault under Antarctica, it probably contains IKEA instructions for pyramids. Page 1. Step 1. Acquire 2,300,000 stone blocks. Step 2. Good luck. Still, the suspicion lingers. Antarctica is the least explored continent on Earth, yet also one of the most controlled. Why such strict oversight for a land of ice and penguins? If you were placed here, maybe your caretakers needed a place to stash their equipment, shielded from prying eyes until you're ready. You take a slow breath, the cold air burning your lungs. The continent feels alive beneath its silence, as though something beneath the ice is listening, waiting. Perhaps it is nothing, or perhaps it is the vault of your placement, holding the proof you've always suspected. The cold wind of Antarctica fades as you walk, and suddenly the world feels warmer, louder, more restless. You're back among people again, billions of them, buzzing with invention, chaos, and curiosity. And now a different thought presses on you. What if humanity wasn't meant to stay quietly in its terrarium? What if you were placed here, yes, but with the expectation that you'd eventually rebel against the petri dish? Mainstream fact. In just a few thousand years, humans have gone from stone tools to space probes. The Voyager spacecraft, launched in the 1970s, is already beyond the solar system, carrying golden records of Earth's sounds and greetings. Historians still argue whether this leap is natural progress or premature ambition, but one thing is clear. You don't stay put, you push outward. Quirky tidbit. In 1977, the WOW signal was detected, a mysterious radio burst from space that lasted just 72 seconds. It never repeated, never explained itself, and remains one of the best candidates for a possible message. Was it chance interference? Or someone answering back just enough to say, "Yes, we hear you"? If you're supposed to be contained, maybe you're already rattling the bars of the cage. You grin because it's true. Humans are terrible at staying in bounds. Give a toddler a playpen and they'll find a way to climb out. Give a species a planet and they'll build rockets. Maybe that rebellious streak isn't a glitch, it's the feature. If you were placed here, the point might have been to see whether you'd accept the enclosure or fight your way past it. Spoiler alert, you're definitely fighting. And sometimes it's messy. Technology that should unite often divides. Discoveries meant to heal can destroy. Yet even in the chaos, there's poetry. You plant flags on the moon, beam selfies from Mars rovers, and build telescopes to peer 13 billion years into the past. If this is rebellion, it's a strangely artistic one. Fringe theorists take it further. They suggest humanity's curiosity is the very thing the caretakers underestimated, or maybe designed on purpose. Like slipping a mischievous code into the DNA, don't just survive. Break boundaries, question everything. You laugh because that certainly tracks. Humans argue about pizza toppings with the same intensity they argue about cosmology. You're not just wired to adapt, you're wired to challenge. Myths hint at it too. Prometheus stealing fire, Adam and Eve eating forbidden fruit, Pandora opening her box. Again and again, stories celebrate or warn about humans rebelling against the limits set for them. Historians still argue whether these tales were about morality or memory. Were they simply allegories about disobedience, or echoes of humanity's first jailbreaks from the laboratory conditions you were placed in? Picture it, caretakers leaning over, watching the experiment and muttering, "Let's see how long they stay inside the lines." Meanwhile, you're already doodling outside the margins, inventing philosophy, rocket ships, and the saxophone. It's hilarious and a little dangerous. And here's the joke you can't resist. If Earth really is a petri dish, then humanity is that one bacterium that somehow evolved skateboards. Imagine the confusion in the cosmic lab. Subject 731 just started doing kickflips. Should we intervene? Yet rebellion isn't just about escaping Earth physically. It's also about thought. Every time someone questions an old assumption, challenges a ruler, or imagines a new story, that's rebellion against the enclosure. It's proof that placement isn't destiny. Even if you were seated here, you're rewriting the script. You stop looking up at the night sky. Stars glitter like holes poked in the ceiling of the lab. Maybe you'll never meet the Watchers, never find the vault, never decode the DNA signature. But you'll keep pushing, keep rebelling, keep scribbling your own meaning across the cosmos. Because that's what humans do. And maybe that's exactly what you were placed here to learn. The stars above feel like breadcrumbs now, scattered across black velvet, and you can't help but follow them. They tug at you the way myths and stories always have, whispering half-remembered truths. You realize that if there is a trail leading back to whoever placed you here, it may not be buried under ice or hidden in DNA. It may already be out in the open, woven into humanity's art, symbols, and stories. A cosmic paper trail. Mainstream fact: myths around the world share uncanny similarities. Floods, sky gods, fiery chariots, golden ages, lost homelands. Civilizations that never met somehow painted from the same palette. Historians still argue whether this is coincidence, parallel invention, or evidence of a shared memory stretching back to humanity's dawn. But the repetition feels like a pattern, like a message scattered across cultures, so it could never be entirely lost. A quirky tidbit: the Nazca lines in Peru, massive geoglyphs etched into the desert, depict animals, spirals, and shapes only visible from the sky. Mainstream archaeology says they were ceremonial, meant to be walked as sacred paths, but fringe thinkers see them as billboards for someone flying overhead. Welcome to Earth. We've got monkeys, spiders, and hummingbirds. Whether practical or spiritual, they're part of the paper trail. You grin because the more you look, the more it feels like humanity has been leaving Easter eggs for itself, even without realizing. Pyramids aligned to Orion, myths of flying serpents across continents, star charts carved into stones. Even medieval art occasionally sneaks in flying discs and glowing wheels. Are these coincidences? Or is the trail so obvious that only skepticism blinds you to it? Fringe theorists often argue that religion itself may be part of the paper trail. The burning bush, the fiery chariot, the pillar of light, all described in language of the time, but possibly echoes of something technological. Historians still argue whether these were divine metaphors or literal events seen through pre-scientific eyes. Either way, the stories endure, carrying forward fragments of something humanity refuses to forget. You imagine the cosmic caretakers chuckling softly. They'll never stop telling stories. Perfect. That's how we'll leave the trail, not in data, in myth. And you can't help but laugh too, because it's brilliant. Paper burns, stone erodes, but a story survives, whispered from grandmother to child, painted in symbols, translated and retranslated, never fully erased. Here's the joke you can't resist. If humanity really was placed here, the caretakers left breadcrumbs the same way you hide vegetables in a child's dinner. They won't notice it now, but one day they'll realize they've been eating spinach all along. The beauty of it is undeniable. Even skeptics, even scientists who dismiss the fringe, still use the paper trail. Archaeologists dig up myths to understand cultures. Astronomers follow ancient star maps. Historians study creation stories to decode human psychology. Whether or not they admit it, the trail is guiding them too. And you, right now, you're walking it. From DNA to pyramids, from Sumerian tablets to Antarctic vaults, from dreams to UFO sightings. Every step is another breadcrumb, another whisper that maybe the answer isn't hidden at all. Maybe it's been sitting in plain sight, waiting for humanity to notice the connections. You pause, letting the thought settle. If you were placed here, then the paper trail is your inheritance, proof that you weren't abandoned. Someone wanted you to find the story, to chase it, to piece it together like a cosmic puzzle. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you're doing tonight. You smile at the absurdity, the beauty, the weight of it. Myths, art, and stories aren't just entertainment. They're maps. And every time you follow one, you take another step closer to remembering where you came from. The breadcrumbs stretch behind you now. Stones, dreams, DNA spirals, myths etched into clay. And ahead, just silence, vast and star-flecked, waiting for you to take the next step. The trail doesn't give you certainty, only the quiet suggestion that maybe, just maybe, you weren't born here by accident. Maybe you were placed. And if that's true, you're not alone. Not now, not ever. Mainstream fact. Nearly every culture on Earth has carried some version of this idea. Whether it's gods placing humans in a garden, spirits guiding ancestors from the sky, or cosmic eggs cracking open to release life, the motif is everywhere. Historians still argue whether this reflects universal imagination or universal memory, but either way, it binds you to every culture, every ancestor, every seeker who looked up and wondered. Quirky tidbit. In 1974, humans sent the Arecibo message, a radio transmission of binary code toward a star cluster 25,000 light-years away. It was a cosmic hello, a self-portrait of humanity's DNA, solar system, and technology. You laugh because if you were placed here, it's basically like writing "Dear caretakers, thanks for the babysitting. Please RSVP." Maybe that's the point. You've gone from place to placing yourself, sending your own breadcrumbs outward. You grin at the absurd comedy of it. Humanity, the unruly house guest, finally deciding to leave a thank you note, millennia late. The deeper thought settles in. Placement doesn't have to mean captivity. Maybe it means intention. Maybe it means belonging to a wider family, even if you don't fully remember them yet. You picture yourself not as a caged animal or a lab rat, but as a child nudged into the world, left with clues and tools, trusted to grow into something bigger. If that's true, then you're not just a subject. You're an heir. And that outsider instinct you've carried, the ache of not fitting in, maybe it isn't a flaw at all. Maybe it's the compass pointing you forward, reminding you there's more than Earth, more than here, more than now. You stop walking. You stand still under the hush of the stars and let the thought wash through you. You were placed here, carefully, deliberately. But you were never meant to be alone. The stories, the stones, the strange lights in the sky, they've been reminders all along. The caretakers, the ancestors, the future selves, they're still out there, waiting for you to catch up. And you smile, softer now, the sarcasm giving way to calm. Because whether you were placed here by gods, aliens, or time-traveling humans, the message is the same. You belong to something larger. And one day, when you've solved enough puzzles and written enough stories, maybe you'll place yourself among the stars in turn. For now, though, you let the silence cradle you, the weight of the mystery pressing down like a blanket. You may not have all the answers, but you have the trail, and you have the night sky above you, whispering. Not alone, never alone. The stars soften, their sharp edges blurring into a gentle glow, and your footsteps slow until you're no longer walking, just floating in the quiet. The questions you've carried, about placement, about watchers, about where you truly belong, begin to settle, not with answers, but with a kind of peace. You don't need certainty tonight. You only need the comfort of possibility. The stones, the myths, the strange lights, They all fade into a single thread, winding gently around you like a soft blanket. You feel it pulling you closer to rest, reminding you that even in mystery there is safety, even in wonder there is calm. Your body grows heavy, but in a sweet way, like sinking into warm sand or curling into a familiar bed. The spine that ached feels supported now. The skin that once burned feels cool. Every flaw feels forgiven, every question softened into dream. The night hums around you, crickets, the low breeze, maybe even the steady whoosh of a fan at your bedside. You let those sounds merge with your breath, slow and steady, carrying you deeper into the quiet. You're not lost, you're placed, perfectly right here, right now, in this moment of rest. And as the last of the thoughts blur, you let yourself drift, down into dreams, into silence, into the long, soothing dark. Good night.